Hello, welcome back. This is Paolo, your host. This is Conversations in Artificial Intelligence. So today, we're going to look at artificial intelligence from a slightly different perspective. In today's economy, there are lots of different industry verticals that can benefit from the use of artificial intelligence. And what we will do today is pick up one of these not very common, but very interesting industry vertical and interview an entrepreneur that is trying to bring artificial intelligence in this sector that was traditionally not automated. So with us today, we have Julius Nyanda, who is the CEO and founder of Housekeys. How are you, Julius?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. So let's try to get kind of a feeling of what you've been doing. You've been an entrepreneur for quite a bit of time. Tell us a few insights on how you became an entrepreneur and how you ended up here in the sunny California in Silicon Valley.
Sure. I was kind of a class clown, coming up in high school and sort of stumbled my way through most of learning. But then I got a chance to intern with a semiconductor company in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, actually, when I was in high school. And they were focusing on what they called the Future View group using scenario planning. And I got really into understanding at that time how fiber optics was going to affect how people just use data, did business back then. And so back then, which is the mid 90s, as a teenager, I got a chance to hang out with all these MBAs that were trying to understand how fiber optic cabling was going to change the industry and a lot of other industries. And that really set me on a path of constantly being into putting together business plans, pitching everything from putting together parties and tournaments to then starting to get into more serious businesses like trading, and eventually got into the financial services industry.
You have been an entrepreneur for quite a number of years now. What is, if you like, the most scary part of starting a technology company? That is what you're doing today. So what is the scary part on going tech?
Well, I think the scariest part of tech is mainly how do you start, right? What technologies are you using? How are you coding? What infrastructure are you using to leverage to build your offering to the marketplace? I think that, especially with it constantly changing, as an entrepreneur that may not be as, starting out, coming at it from an engineer standpoint, you're always trying to make sure that you're using the best technology to start. Do you build with a Postgres database, or do you build with an SQL? I mean, there's a lot of different questions around server, database, language. What platform do you go, browser versus mobile? So I think a lot of questions for an entrepreneur like myself really came from, what is the best place to start? How do I start so that we have the most success, not just 1 year out, but 2 or 3 years out?
So if you had to tell your friends what this company is doing in 60 seconds, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them that we're building, at best, I could explain it as a community program operating system, right? So there's a marketplace of programs out there that are looking for what they call eligible households, people that fit a particular income criteria, and the government is trying to get them resources, whether they be affordable housing, lending, education resources. And so you sort of have this information asymmetry between the people that are looking for resources like affordable housing and education, and the government trying to find eligible households to apply for those programs and make the best use of those programs. So you have this sort of disconnect between these two parties. And that's really what Housekeys is trying to build, both a marketplace and an operating system to be able to bring these two parties together.
If you really think of what you said, the symmetry in information between the government providing services and a variety of services across the entire country and people that would be eligible for those services. One, why do we need something like your company? Two, why there is an opportunity to provide information services, if you like, besides what Google does?
I think it's probably the best way to respond would be almost looking at it like, why do you have Netflix to search through your best and most appropriate videos as opposed to searching through Google? And I think that the difference is when you sign up for a service like Netflix, Netflix knows something about you, your history, your viewing history, and they use that knowledge about you to then go out and curate the best opportunities that fit your circumstances. In this case, you're watching a movie. In our case, we're really trying to match you up with the best program resources. So for somebody that's out there searching the vast internet, because now it's not just a couple of 100,000 websites, we're talking about millions and billions of pieces of information that people are searching. So it's really about leveraging a person's personal information to recommend the best program opportunities for them. And not just recommend, but also you have questions about their eligibility and do they meet the requirements of that program? And all of that can be automated. And that's really where Housekeys sort of fits in. Even though you do have these titans like Google out there, there's still a lot of information beneath the information that really leverages who the person is that's asking. Right? Who's asking the question is a major part of what we do.
Can you explain us a little bit what is the offering and how today people access to that offering?
Yeah, I think best to set the table on exactly what we call the programmatic universe, right? So everything starts from the federal government. The federal government doesn't really tell any particular city or state what to do, but it does offer money if that state helps it reach certain national objectives. So the government spends about $800 billion a year allocating program resources through state and local governments. State and local governments put together plans and then put together programs and target certain people in the population that meet certain criteria because that's part of the national objective. So if a government says, we want to make sure low to moderate income households, people that fit a certain income category, are not paying too much for housing, then they may allocate billions of dollars towards affordable housing programs. And as local and state governments respond to that opportunity to get access to those federal dollars, they themselves start structuring these programs. And as they put that out there to the marketplace or to the public to try to attract those kinds of applicants, that's where somebody like Housekeys comes in, because the administration and the design and the operations and the workflows associated with connecting people and programs is extremely complicated and extremely costly. And so what Housekeys does first is give any local government the opportunity to outsource that complicated process and also leverage a lot of the lessons learned and best practices and data services and technology that we have in-house to be able to create a very streamlined way to connect people and programs.
I like to look at what it is today, the typical situations that the user of these programs experiences.
Well, just to focus on one area like homeownership, as an example, the US sells about 5 million houses a year. And according to certain statistics, there's nearly 60% of those home sales qualify for some sort of government assistance of some sort. Yet most real estate agents, the average person doesn't know those resources exist. So they end up purchasing a house without using those resources. And a lot of those resources go unused every single year, right? So there's a lot of what we call program waste out there, right? People are handling transactions, engaging in these transactions without the knowledge that the government wants to help them do that more efficiently, do that in a way that enables them to still participate in the economy. I think the biggest thing to understand about programs and why the government does this, they definitely don't do this out of the kindness of their heart. They're trying to make sure that the GDP and the economy is growing as fast as possible. So the more people pay for something like housing, the less they have available to participate in other aspects of the economy. So the first way somebody would use something like this would be like a brand new home buyer buying for the first time, asking a simple question: what resources are out there for me to help me buy my first house? And are there certain home ownership opportunities that are only available to me as a first-time home buyer? The answer to both those questions is yes. There's down payment assistance to help somebody buy their first home, and there are specific homes that are priced according to income levels that person may be eligible to purchase, and that might put them in a better financial position than buying a normal home on the market. And so what we try to do is illuminate a lot of those opportunities for the public, and at the same time, obviously help those providers connect with the public.
We have touched on many dimensions, one of which has been, the approach of the user to access the services. The other one has been also trying to understand the overall government need that you're trying to fill. Let's look at the finance of this by building a system like the ones that you are in the process of building. What type of savings in managing these processes you think you could bring to the government, one, and two, out of the $1 billion unutilized, what do you think it's possible to make utilized with this technology?
Well, I think you definitely have a 30 to 40% gain in utilization of capital. So if the government's allocating $800 billion and you've got 60% of first-time homebuyer programs going unused, you're talking about billions of dollars that are going to be available that, one, will help people make purchases, but then you also look at the indirect benefits of people having the extra cash, right? Because now you're talking about people being able to buy more houses to participate in the economy or participate in home purchasing at a higher clip than they do now. And so there's a lot of economic activity surrounding a home purchase. That's not just about the purchase itself, but when more people buy homes, there's a lot of job creation coming out of that.
Just to summarize this, at high level, you would bring efficiencies for the governments in operational costs. You would improve the capital utilization of government program, indirectly impact the GDP, because basically these programs are specifically designed to increase the discretionary income that certain level of the population have, so that they spend more, and theoretically the government gets more income from the taxes that are generated by all the economy moving up. Finally, there is also a component on informing the people that might qualify for this type of services through some kind probably of internet marketing, internet platforms, and so on. Where does artificial intelligence play a role?
Artificial intelligence is really throughout the entire process. When I think about the first part of it, which is if I'm the person in that homeowner scenario asking what opportunities are out there for me, recommendation engines are right off the bat, right? Instead of me going and searching through web pages and websites to try to understand what's out there, and a recommendation engine would use my information to tell me what's most suitable for my situation. So I think the recommendation engine is a big one. The other part of it is when you go through this process of determining eligibility, it's underwriting. And, a lot of experts will tell you that the native industry for AI or machine learning is insurance, because you've got a lot of underwriting, probability, pricing, all of that's incorporated in insurance. I would go a step further and say the native industry for machine learning and AI is underwriting, because mortgage underwriting, insurance underwriting, program eligibility underwriting, what they all share is this need to use information to determine probability, to determine optimization, to determine classification. So you've got a lot of aspects of the underwriting process that utilizes a lot of what machine learning can bring to a workflow.
Insurance has been used these techniques for determining eligibility or pricing their services for at least 2 decades, I would say, and they become more sophisticated. Now they're becoming even more sophisticated in the last few years. So really the changes in the scale and precision of what data they can handle, and two, in introducing less unstructured data into the process, such as reading documents and being able to use those as an element to make assessment. So where is the government at in this process of underwriting? So are we in a situation where it's still completely manual, or they do have, as of today, a level of predictive algorithm utilized?
I would say a bit of both. There's the underwriting industry has had automated underwriting models for several decades. That's been a major part of how the industry functions together today, based on what they call automated underwriting systems. I think the step further, or the further evolution of that process, is going to be in real-time underwriting, where you're not waiting for somebody to produce a lot of documentation in order to run them through that automated underwriting engine, but you're leveraging the information as they're building the profile to really generate more and more of a clear picture of that decision, rather than wait for the submission. So there's such a mix right now of manual and automated, right? There's a very manual process on how people submit their package to the underwriter. The underwriter still does a review, but very much relies on automated underwriting engines to assist in making the decision. I think what's going to happen is we're going to move from a place where the engines assist the manual underwriting to where the manual, if anything, would just be an audit and not something that's part of the actual underwriting of the file. And I think that's going to speed up the process. A lot of speed can be gained here. It's going to lower costs. I think it's going to make better decisions and eliminate a lot of bias in underwriting. So a manual underwriter may be making a decision based on their own personal experience. And so what AI allows you to do is first illuminate those biases at scale, but then also start to eliminate them, because you'll be able to identify that, hey, there was some bias when we made the decision last time. Maybe we need to tweak our models to be more egalitarian in terms of how we allow people to get access to these programs.
Why you're pursuing this now at this time and age? What has changed in the technology, if you like, that allows you to pursue this? Would you have done it 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
No, I think what really had to happen was a combination of the data economy had to get to where it is now. I think the open data movement has allowed a lot of people to provide data. A lot of government data is available that wasn't available before. I think a lot more data providers have APIs that allow for sync integration, so you can bring more data into your space to be able to be analyzed. I think the cost of storage has gone tremendously, a lot lower over the past decade, just over the last few years. And the cost of processing power has gone way down when you look at services like AWS and Azure and all these different service providers. So you have a lot more machine capability. You have a lot more data and a much more efficient data economy. And then you have really more coding tools that are available to you to be able to take advantage of, you know, what would have been in our platform. Now you've got really great stuff being developed in Python. And so I think when you're looking at the evolution of what you can do with code, what's happened with data and the availability of data, and what's happened with processing power, I think we're just in a different space than we were even 5 years ago.
What type of data you have access today in these areas that you didn't have access yesterday?
I would say the social media access is a big one. I think people have much more social profile than they had before. Financial data is much more available today. I think what you've seen over the past 10 years is account aggregation software completely changed what we understand about finances. Companies like Yodlee and Intuit were building aggregation software, and that was very innovative 10 years ago. It almost functions in the background today. So those types of that availability of somebody's transaction history, and also the critical mass that's been reached on credit data. FICO score is we're talking about something that just came out in the 90s, right? Before the 1990s, you didn't even have a FICO score, right? People were really still doing it based on, you come from a good family, you come from a good place, and do I know you was the way that we did a lot of things. So right now we have a lot more information. The credit bureaus have really opened up on their APIs and their open data to allow more people to tap that data and that information. So I think what you've reached is almost a critical mass of opportunity, but we have a long way to go. I think the government data, especially at the local government level, they're way behind the other sectors in terms of providing data. But as we get better at providing data to third parties and creating a data exchange network, then I feel like underwriting is only going to get more and more intelligent. And that's really what's happening, is really data. We're now making data an initiative in organizations, as opposed to something that's just done in the science domain and not really something that's critical to the business domain. Natural language processing is a major part of what we're doing. Every single one of these programs that I'm talking to you about involve a lot of legal documentation. From the time a government creates the program and the legislation around the program creation, to anything from land use policy, to how developers actually have to sign affordable housing agreements to produce the housing, And then you have the restriction agreement that a person signs with a bunch of legalese to be able to involve themselves in the program. So I think the legal industry, and we may have to credit the IP and the intellectual property for this, is that the ability to bring on natural language processing to interpret what's happening within that legal document. What are the key concepts, the recitals, the definitions? What are the preambles? What are the main concepts that come out of a legal document? That's really impactful for our industry, especially in the government sector, programmatic sector, where we rely so heavily on legal documentation.
I'd like to move our conversation a little bit now on the business side of this. Any marketplace has a challenge, has an intrinsic challenge. One is convincing the provider of services that you are a reliable, trustworthy, and worth the business with partner. And that usually is connected with how many users you have on your platform. And the other part of it is bringing the users on the platform so that they can use the service and so that you can become attractive for the suppliers of the information service that the marketplace is trying to do. How do you go about this?
This is definitely our biggest challenge. It's a little bit of chicken before the egg. You know, you need the households that are applying for the programs, but you need the programs that the households are applying for. So trying to make sure that we have a healthy marketplace and we have a thick marketplace that allows us to attract a lot of households is a challenge. For us, what we try to do is focus first with the hardest party to work with, and that's the eligible household. It's harder for all the parties to find that eligible household, the person that meets that sweet spot of not making too much that they're over the income limit, but they make enough that they're viable for whatever the program is offering. So if I take homeownership as an example, and I say the median income in a county like Santa Clara is $125,200, I have to find a family that makes less than $125,200, but that has the income needed to afford a $600,000 house, right? Because in a county like Santa Clara, a $600,000 house, believe it or not, is considered an affordable housing. People don't know that because they don't appreciate what's going on in the Bay Area, but that's kind of what space we play in. So being able to get affordable housing candidates or low to moderate income households to feel as though this is a great resource to get them educated about where the opportunities are is how we hope to attract as many of those affordable housing candidates as possible, what we call low to moderate income or income qualified households that come on board. From there, we then go to the parties that have such a hard time getting access to those households and say, hey, we've got, you know, this kind of traction with the low to moderate income households. Make sure you put your programs on our system so that we can make them available. Set up your program storefront so that they know who you are. So for us, we really decided that when we were at this fork in the road as to whether or not we go after program providers or we go after households, we decided to focus on households because they seem to be the hardest party to get a hold of.
So how do you accomplish technically this task of bringing the householders on the platform? So you focus on them as a first strategic objective. So how do you go about this?
Well, our first thing is our investment is around the data acquisition, right? Because you're really trying to help affordable housing candidates understand what are they going to get instantly when they sign up for your service. Well, instantly they get the way that they're categorized. And they normally don't realize how many different people out there have a schedule that changes annually that categorizes them as a low to moderate income household. So a bank is going to categorize them according to their metropolitan area. A state program is going to qualify them based on the median income. A federal program may qualify them based on a different analysis of their metropolitan area. So we try to use a lot of targeted advertising, but really around mobile as well, where we're going into communities where we're working with that city or that organization while we're getting them to put their programs on our site, we're pinging all of these mobile devices and getting access to these households to let them know, listen, there are programs coming online. Make sure you go to our website and find out how you're categorized. The key thing for us is we have to make sure that we're pinging folks to provide that value and categorization, and then we use their mobile devices as the primary means to get them on our site. And that's our main focus is using that information.
One of the big concerns out there in the society around artificial intelligence is this problem of so-called bias. One of the bias people are worried about is really in this underwriting problem where they believe that taking the human out of the loop might constitute the machines. They have no heart, basically, and might seclude certain minorities into a situation where they will never have any form of opportunity. How do you go about eliminating or mitigating this possibility? 3, is this possibility really real, or maybe this type of programs, as you said before, could actually instead doing the opposite, and that is giving access to people that didn't have access to opportunities before?
Yeah, I think that the issue of bias and how that fits with AI and algorithms is definitely a great point. One of the things that a great example for one of the oldest data companies that are out there really doing this in this space is how Google sort of optimizes and retrains their models to sort of make sure that they're indexing with the best results, and not all of the people out there doing optimization that are trying to make sure their results pop up at the top of the search engine. I think the same thing is applied here in underwriting, is that the underwriting engine is constantly spitting out decisions on eligibility or ineligibility, compliance or lack of compliance. And so what you're trying to do is not necessarily replace the underwriter, but let the underwriter be part of the optimization process to retrain and tweak those and modify those models to make sure that they're always performing according to their fitness function. And I think that's the piece that I feel we're almost pushing down and democratizing data science and taking it out of the hands of just a scientist that's focused on, the mathematical element of it, to really bring it into the context of how human workers are going to be there to train or be a part of the training process for those models. I think that's the shift. Today, we think of analytics or machine learning or AI as a lot of times the data science team over there, that department deals with this. I hand them the data, they spit me back a report, and that's the relationship that exists in a lot of organizations today. I think where we're going is more of a fusion of what happens in the data science department and what happens with the folks that are in charge of the workflows that provide the training data and the data to those modeling entities. So I think what we're going to see is a fusion between the two factions of an entity, so that they come together as one and check for these bias issues. You can't really allow the machine to go off on its own and constantly issue decisions without an audit. And that auditing process is going to be a very big part of how we make sure to check for those items.
One of the interests out there broadly in the society, in academia, is what's called artificial intelligence for the social good. Have you thought of it in this perspective, and what is your viewpoint about the potential social impact of a technology like yours?
I think there's no end to what the social impact can be of the type of work that Housekeys does and other similar companies. I think what's important is historically we've sort of thought of economics itself in the aggregate, right? We think of numbers like GDP, and we think of just consumer spending in the aggregate demand, aggregate market signals. What we're getting into is really microeconomics and applied economics, and I would go further and say personalized economics. And I think with a more personalized approach to economics, people go from being very reactionary and very unintentional with how they plan their economic lives to being a lot more intentional and a lot more proactive about how they deal with their economic lives. Whether it's tapping government resources to help them further their goals, or whether it's leveraging opportunities in the marketplace to help them increase their incomes, I think a lot of that has been relying on an employer to kind of make that happen for them. And now we're talking about really personalizing their economic existence, as opposed to just waiting on the market or waiting on an employer or waiting on something to happen from an outside entity. So I really feel like, we're at this interesting time where you've got a lot of populism, a lot of talk about the system being rigged, to data science allowing people to understand the components of that system. So when you say wealth is a concept, it's a standard. Being rich, again, is a standard, is a category. these are things that are important. People talk about the corporation. Well, the corporation is just paperwork that an individual files. I think unpacking a lot of these things that people have been sort of putting off to the side as being too complicated while they've just kind of focused on their jobs, we're now forced to truly engage in the economy. And I think social good entities that are used to making this be something that the impoverished or the underserved need are really looking at it more about from a position of empowerment as opposed to, you know, assistance and need. It's really about empowering people as opposed to just helping them.
I want to thank our audience for being here today. So we discussed a very interesting case in which an entrepreneur with a great vertical experience is trying to bring artificial intelligence to create a new service, basically increase optimizations and resource optimizations in the marketplace, cut costs, and ultimately make the life of several people around the country much better. With that said, if you have any questions, please comment below. If you have suggestions for additional content, reach out to me. And for the time being, Julius, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure having you here.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.